Well guys, here we go again. We get to do another video lesson. So let's jump right in. Here's your problem. Oh, by the way, I meant to tell you that I know you liked my Christmas tree so much in the other videos that I've given you a shot of my other Christmas tree. So you're just getting a whole tour of my house. Here's our problem. George weeded a fifth of the garden and John weeded some too. When they were finished, 2/3 of the garden still needed to be weeded. How much of the garden did John weed? So I want you in just a second to click pause and then go work this problem, and when you're done, come back. Alright, so hopefully you went and worked it, and now let's see how you did. So we're going to start by looking at a model that represents our problem. So if we think of our whole, which is the garden, we know that George weeded a fifth. So there's 1/5, George. And it says John weeded some too. We don't know what that is. When they were finished, 2/3 still needed to be weeded. So let's say this is 2/3 that's not weeded. So right here, what we don't know is John. So how can we solve this problem? It's kind of similar to the one we did yesterday. We can either start with our whole and subtract the parts that are used and see how much is left, or we can add up what we have and then see how much more we need to get to the whole. So let's start by adding, because I bet that is what most people did. So if we start, we've got to add 1/5 plus 2/3. And obviously those don't have the same denominator, so we have to make them have the same denominator. We can't say 5 divided by anything to get 3 or 3 times anything to get 5. At least whole numbers, right? So we've got to come up with a new common denominator. So the common denominator that I hope you came up with is 15. So if we look at 1/5, we can say 1/5 to get to equal a denominator of 15. To that 5, we have to say times 3/3, because 5 times 3 is 15, so 1 times 3 is 3. And now we have to do the same thing with 2/3. To make 2/3 equal a denominator of 15, we've got to multiply by what? 5/5, because 3 times 5 is 15. So now we know our numerator, 2 times 5 is 10. So these are our new fractions that we now have with the same denominator. So we can say 3/15 plus 10/15 equals how much? 13/15. So I know that if I take the part that George did and the part that's not weeded, that will tell me how much is left that John did. So a whole, we're dealing with 15. So a whole is the same thing as what? In 15ths. 15/15. So we can say 13/15 plus what is going to equal 15/15, which is 1 whole. And we know how many 15ths do we need? We need 2/15. So that means that John weeded 2/15 of the garden. And I cannot simplify that any because 2 is an even number. Its only factors are 1 and 2, so it's also prime. And 2 is not a factor of 15, so I can't simplify it any. Now let's look at if you subtracted back. So we've got to say 1 whole minus a fifth and minus 2/3. And that's going to tell us how much is left. And we can subtract it 2 different ways. We can combine the 1/5 and 2/3 and subtract all that at one time, or we could do it in different parts. I'm going to do it in different parts since we just added 1/5 and 2/3 together and we know what that is. I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do it a different way. So let's start by saying 1 whole minus 1/5. So I need to think about a whole in terms of fifths, because that's what I'm dealing with right here. So 1 whole is how many fifths? 1 whole is the same thing as 5/5. So 5/5 minus 1/5 is going to be 4 fifths. So now I've done this part of my equation. Now I need to subtract the 2/3. So I need to say the 4/5, which is what I had, minus 2/3. Now we're back to those different denominators. We can't subtract. Do not subtract straight across and say 4 minus 2 is 2, 5 minus 3 is 2. Okay? That answer would be 2/2, which is 1 whole. And that doesn't even make sense with our problem, right? Because we started with a whole and then have to take things away. So be thinking about what makes sense while you're doing this. So let's change fifths and thirds now to 15ths to get our common denominator. So to change 4/5 into 15ths, I've got to say times 3/3. 5 times 3 is 15. 4 times 3 is 12. So now I have 12/15ths for my 4/5. I got to do it with 2/3. 2/3 to equal 15ths. I got to say what? 3 times what is 15? 5. So I've got to say times 5/5. Because remember, whatever we do to the denominator, we also have to do to the numerator to keep them equivalent and equal. So 3 times 5 is 15. 2 times 5 is 10. So now I have 12/15ths and 10/15ths. Remember, 12/15ths was my 4/5 minus my 2/3, which is 10/15ths. So 12/15ths minus 10/15ths, what am I left with? 2/15ths. Just like we said yesterday, if you work this problem 2 different ways, I wrote tenths, didn't I? Don't know why I wrote that. 2/15ths. But just like we said yesterday, if you get 2 different answers when you use 2 different strategies, that should be your clue that you did something wrong and you need to go back and check. And since you know 2 ways to solve this problem, it's a good idea to do them both, especially if you were taking a test, just to double check yourself and make sure you got it right. So what I want you to do now is go work the bookstore problem, right? Yeah. Just in case, you should have it copied, but just in case for some reason it's not copied, here's the problem. Lang went to the bookstore. He spent 1/3 of his money on a pen and 4/7 of his money on books. What fraction of his money did he have left? Then the second part of the question says, if Lang had $42, how much money did he spend at the bookstore? Okay, I think you have the paper, but just in case, there it is. If you need to listen to it again, you can. And then when you get done working it out, I want you to go to the next video and then watch me solve that, okay?